So let me tell you this World War II story. There's this guy, Abraham Wald, and the Ministry of Defense during World War II was like, hey, there's all these planes coming back with holes in their wings, right? I want you to find out where these are statistically and armor them up. And he's like, no. What you need to be doing is look at the planes that didn't come back. That's what you need to armor up because those guys didn't make it, right? The data you're looking at is wrong. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because Amazon is lying to you.
Great intro, Ali. Love the story.
Story's good. And it illustrates a really good point, right?
Yeah.
Which is so often we're looking at the wrong stuff, right? The data you're looking at is the wrong data or you're not looking at the right way.
Yeah, I think that's the key point, right? It's not that the data is bad. The data is fine, but you're missing things. You're not asking enough questions around it. I think we see this particularly when we talk about keywords, right? We'll look at keywords that are doing really well for us because they're the ones that are driving the orders. But we're not necessarily looking beyond that data to see exactly where our next opportunity is or where our growth should be coming from.
And what's actually going on, right?
Yeah.
And I know this seems really abstract, despite the story at the beginning about the World War II bombers, right? But it seems abstract, right? Because normally we go, and we've said before on the pod, where we're basically like, look at the funnel, look at the data, follow down the metrics, where are people dropping out, and that's what you need to work on, right? We say that often.
Yes,
right?
we do.
And it's true. You do need to do that, right? But and there may be things that the data is saying that you just aren't factoring into your funnel. It's just not part of that funnel analytics or that dashboard, right? And to make that a bit more concrete, Leon, who actually came up with this topic, he has a really good story on this, right? So, Leon, can you tell the people?
Yes, thank you, Al. Well, I was, doing my day-to-day on Amazon, and we work with a brand who is a gardening-based brand. I won't go into any more detail than that, but I was looking at the data and I suddenly saw sales spike for a couple of days, and I thought, well, we're just doing a really good job. Of course we're doing a really good job. Let's keep going. Let's keep investing into the things that are doing well. But then I stopped and I thought, is there anything else at play here? And turns out the weather was really good on those 2 days. And then I went back and looking at previous years and I was looking at, okay, we did really well in this time period. I looked at April last year and it was the hottest April and sunniest April since something like 1890. Okay. So what that told me is don't just look at the numbers in terms of the advertising. Don't just allow one bit of data to sway your judgment. Because if I haven't thought about the weather, I could have just been launching loads more spend into those campaigns, then the next day when it rains and it just spends and doesn't convert. Yeah,
or just changed your whole strategy based on an incomplete picture, right? That's a big part of the whole thing.
And it got me thinking, what else do people miss just by looking at the data and not thinking about contextual factors?
Yeah. The holistic approach. And we say this, right? Because when we talk about, say, Christmas deliveries, right? This logic comes into Christmas in Q4 a lot, right? And Zamir, you talk about this in your talks, where you talk about how the cutoff time is a big factor, right? Because depending on how close you are to the cutoff time, is going to affect, are you going to buy online or not?
Yeah.
And are you going to buy on Amazon or not?
Yeah.
Quick pause. Just a little heads up, as we were recording this, the fire alarm went off in the background. Everything was fine, but you're going to hear it for about 10 to 20 seconds. Let's keep going. And then the other bit you talk about is the weather.
Yep.
And how the weather where you are is a huge factor. And it doesn't actually matter if it's the weather where you are, it's the weather where the customer is.
I think that's a really important point. And weather where the customer is can impact dramatically the bigger the region you're covering. So in the UK, we generally have a north-south split. US has much wider splits. Europe as well, quite considerable.
Well, fire alarm.
Let's go.
Fire alarm's going off, David.
We'll come back.
Pause.
Especially when it comes to international sales, US, huge geography, multiple weather points potentially going on at the same time, impacting things. In Europe as well, we see that. I think the other thing to consider is that it doesn't necessarily have to be weather that's affecting it. There are so many other points. Competitors are probably drive the most impact, right?
Yeah.
So if you've got a competitor that's running low on inventory, that might have an effect. If they're really high on inventory, they might be doing lots of promotions.
Yeah.
And understanding the psychology almost of your
What's going on.
competitor, that tells you what.
Because a lot of data won't do that, right? So a lot of when you're tracking things, you'll be blind to what your competitors are doing.
Yeah.
Right. So if your sales are down, you may just be like, "Why are sales down?" You could just the really basic thing of just searching your keyword and be like, "Oh, there's like 3 people running a lightning deal or a big promotion right now. I'm not. They're eating up all the traffic. So what I need to do is work out what's going to be my response off the back of that."
And
right?
what's really
gonna come
interesting,
out?
if you look at with our team, when we're working with brands where we know we get to know the competitors really well, right?
Yeah.
So we look and we track their promotion cycles, for example.
Yeah.
We also track
And
what
your BSR.
what their bestseller rank, see how that's been impacted. Ranking on a daily basis. We're in fact intradaily we're looking at it. Hour by hour, we report and we look at our rank versus others. But fundamentally, what we're also building is psychological profiles on each of our competitors. We can kind of know going into a season how they're
Each one's
most
gonna
likely to
behave.
react and behave. And also we can read their behavior as well. So we can determine when they do certain things as to why that might be. And again, a lot of it's inventory related. It could be COGS related if we know something else is happening within that market. There are so many things there that need to be considered. So it's not so much that your dashboard is lying to you and telling you, because it's showing you a very small, narrow picture.
Yeah.
The scope is much wider.
So actually, yeah, I want to not correct it, but just kind of expand on that, because I was kind of being facetious, right? Saying Amazon's lying to you, right? So they're not actually lying to you. They're just giving you the data, but they're giving you a chunk of the data. It's your job as the human and the expert or the practitioner to then go, this is this chunk of the data and the information. I need to understand the whole thing.
Yeah.
And also, a big part of that is judgment, right? So one is going to be, the data is going to be this information. However, I also know that this is currently trending on TikTok. My customer's doing this. The weather's doing this. And therefore, that's why the picture looks like it does. Now, the data will give you clues, but it's not giving you the whole picture, right? And so that's what I'm really saying. I was being facetious. It's not lying to you. It's just giving you incomplete truth.
Yeah. You just need to be considering a much wider scope of data inputs to be able to make that final decision. 100%. Another point that's worth pointing out is this affects advertising as well. And I think a lot of times people look at advertising solely on its own. And again, you can draw incorrect conclusions just from that data too. So the wider scope of context you pull in, the better it's likely to be. One really good example to pull out is like return on ad spend. I think a lot of people focus in on return on ad spend, and they assume if it's a solid, strong return on ad spend, then that's a good campaign. And if it's a really poor return on ad spend, it's a bad campaign. And we've had conversations about this. One of the key gripes I have is that like you could have a strong return on ad spend. That campaign looks great. If you don't consider top of search percentage, I mean, if you could have like, say you've got a ROAS of 4 or 5 or 6 even, but your top of search is 20%, you're only hitting 20%. You've got 5 times more growth that you could be going into on that. And you're completely missing that because your scope is too narrow on it.
Yes, I think points made. There's stuff that people are missing, right? But the question really then remains is, what should you be doing? What are you going to do if you know these blind spots exist? What should people be doing? And what are your thoughts?
Well, I think if you think back to when we first kind of started this project, an idea of looking at the opportunity costs on our data and looking at consumer psychology, up until that point, we used data to make very deterministic decisions. So it was like that idea of, okay, this has happened in the past, so if we continue to do it,
the next thing's going
to happen, or follow on, rather than bringing in that probabilistic side of it. So it's like, okay, what is actually the probability of this continuing, but also what is the probability of doing something slightly different and getting a different result out of it?
Yeah. So I guess there's 2 parts to that. One of them is, I guess, on a regular basis, ask yourself, what am I missing?
Yeah, what am I not doing?
What am I not thinking about, right?
What if I tried something different? What is the probability that something else might have happened? Might have come out of it.
Okay, so I've got the data. Is there anything else that could be factoring things in here? Whether geopolitics, trends in the market, competitors,
yeah.
all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, all of that stuff.
But Leon, you do this on a daily basis.
Yes. Yeah, well, I think what you guys have just mentioned on there is using judgment outside of the data. But there is also an element of using the judgment with the data. And there's a part of this which is people can still rely on the data, but not one data point. So you also want to be looking at the market, for example. So my example is we have a brand who sell kind of like cacao powder. And at the moment, it's flying. And just looking at that piece of data, or generally if anyone's got a product in a category that's flying, you might be like, okay, we need to invest more in the inventory, we need to invest more in the advertising, we need to keep pushing this, and we're going to focus our entire strategy around this. But because we also added another layer of data on top of that, which is the market historically, we know that from April, May, that market is actually going to drop significantly. So we're having to make that kind of counterproductive decision that even though something is absolutely killing it right now, we're not going to invest more into it in the future, and we're actually going to look to replace the revenue with other products.
Because it's a declining market.
Exactly. And that's a very hard thing to do, at least in my experience, a very hard thing to do when something is smashing it,
Doing
especially
so well
on Amazon, to be like, that's actually not going to be, there's not going to continue.
Yeah.
Because people just want to keep seeing the good numbers, like, oh, this is great, this is great. So I think that's the other one, like I said, judgment outside of the data, but also judgment to not just rely on one piece of data.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. And I love how you say that, because it's like judgment with the data. Because when we started, there wasn't all this data.
No,
right?
it wasn't at all. You're right.
This was pure judgment. I know for me, I was running completely on gut and instinct when we started out. And I was just thinking from my customer's perspective, what am I doing? And just working from the customer's perspective the whole time.
I think you're right to an extent with gut, but I still think you were probably looking at data points. I bet you were looking at the number of units were sold, your ratings, your rankings.
Yeah, I was looking at this stuff.
But maybe not in a structured way.
But not in a structured way. I didn't have like all the dashboards we have now, all the flows. I was just, habitually I was looking at certain data points like several times an hour.
Your sales,
yeah,
your units.
Sales, revenue, units sold, that kind of stuff.
But you knew there was behavior to that as well. There were patterns. You know your expectations. You knew what you expected it to be at 11 a.m., 2 p.m., 5 p.m.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, if we're sitting here at like 10 a.m., this is going to be a good day or a bad day.
Yeah. I bet you almost even knew what your actual final end of day was likely to be on the back of it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think you're right, Leon. So there's like an element of data, but heavily coupled with judgment.
Yeah, and that is very much that deterministic approach, right? That was, okay, historically, that's what's likely to happen. It will continue along this.
As a brand, if you're a brand owner, or if you're someone who works quite heavily in a brand, you live and breathe the category. You live and breathe what you're doing, and you should understand the customer, the market, what's going on, and hopefully you use the product. Right, and so you have a good sense of what's going on in that space.
I mean, you're right, and I don't think I was in the same position as you. Right, I made the same gut decisions, having seen a handful of data points, but I think we could get away with it back then because it was a lot less competitive than it is now.
Yeah.
That
Exactly.
attitude, that
now
approach.
You have to up your game. You have to up your game.
Yeah, it's so much more significantly harder. There's so much more competition. You have to rely on advertising so much more. So much more.
And AI is coming into things.
Risk on that side. And it's constantly changing. And AI will definitely flux things for sure.
I've got hopefully a closing point on this one, which is everyone's using the same data you're using. So it really is that additional judgment that can give you the edge and thinking. It always comes back to thinking outside of the box, I guess.
I love that point.
That's a really good point.
I think this really comes down to it's the antithesis of that idea that you can formulate things.
Yeah,
you can just create a formula off of a handful of data points and create a winner.
And it doesn't work that way.
It's not only human involvement. It's trained human involvement.
Yeah,
who is paying attention to the whole scope of the data all of the time. Mm-hmm. And this fundamentally comes down to this point. It's not secret sauce. It's not magic fairy dust. It's hard work. It's an expertise and a lot of grind.
Okay, so we started out saying that the data is lying to you. It's not. It's just not giving you a complete picture. Yeah. What we're really trying to say here is look at the data, but apply your judgment and let that guide you with the data. Don't just go data alone. It's going to be an incomplete picture.
And you're just going to get better at it. You're going to learn more.
Yeah, you'll get better over time and be fully refined.
Outperform your competitors.
And you'll be the plane that's flying home.
Absolutely. That's
Cool,
the most
guys.
important thing. Survive.
Yeah. Sweet, guys. We'll leave it there. One love.
One love.